Welcome to the Johnny Dell Football Academy podcast on the channel that's trying to answer the whys and hows of the game by talking through and dissecting game film and diving deeper to explain why the X's zig and the O's zag. I am Adam Marino, joined by Mr. Johnny Dell, and we are reminding you, as always, the most fun way to watch is on YouTube, where we go live. There you can comment into the live show. Be sure to hit the notification bell and turn on your notifications so you can be a part of the conversation. We also stream live on Facebook and X. Also, the audio versions are always found on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, if you are live with us in the chat, it's probably because you are subscribed, you've hit the notification bell, and turned those notifications on. So, when sharing with your friends, be sure to let them know. We also love to hear from you outside of our live show. Email us at johnnydellsfootballacademy@gmail.com, and you can always check out the website JFA49.com, as it is the most fun way to support the channel. Also, the way we boost the chat and boost the algorithm is to type out hashtag JD49.
What is up? John, I gotta say, we did that new intro video like a month and a half ago. It gets me jacked up every time. It gets me excited to go.
It reminds me of 1990s workout with the football team with, like, you know, your Pantera on the background from Texas. I gotta go pay. I'm just saying. Yeah. It brings me back, man. I'm jacked. I'm ready to go, Johnny.
Yeah. I recorded that background track, and I was going for like an Avenged Sevenfold / Zakk Wylde kind of vibe to it. So I was like, you know, because I had a one track, and I was like, I need a little more energy on it. I need a little more get up and go. And so we threw that together. Really love it, and it's a great way to intro the channel. Thank you so much for everybody that is in the chat. John, your channel is lighting it up. We got a bunch of people here. They're hitting the hashtag CC, which is the countdown crew, and it is popping. They are here. We got CC, BB, and JD49 from Kim Sorensen. She's hitting all of them. Wayne will be joining us at some point here.
Kim's a him. So I made that mistake too back in the day. Kim's a him from Denmark. One of the coolest dudes.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Looks exactly like Phil Dawson, and his Twitter handle is not Phil Dawson. That's his tag. Not he's the best. He's the best of the best.
Hey, big shout out to Phil Dawson. He was a great kicker for us, man. Made some real clutch kicks. Not sure he was worth a third round pick as some of our kickers.
Why you gotta get me started, Johnny?
Because we're talking about past drafts. But you know, it's really fun to look back at history and kind of see where the 49ers have come from. But what's also really fun is to be able to look forward as we are looking forward to this season, because that's what the draft is all about, right? It's about the hope of the future. It's about the hope of these dreams being realized and the hope that the 49ers will finally cross the hump. And they just released their schedule this last week. You might hear my son in the background talking. He's 2. He's a few feet away from me. He's pushing a big yoga ball around.
He's excited about the schedule.
But one thing that I love about the schedule coming out is that it starts to be able to look forward to some 49ers Rush road trip. And it's something that you've put together for people who may be living under a rock still, or maybe are from a third world country and they haven't heard of a 49ers Rush road trip. Tell us a little bit about what that is and what you do.
Yeah, so 49ersrushroadtrip.com, we want to bring people together. I'm from Dallas, and so when I first started going to 49ers games, I would travel by myself to a city, whatever's closest to where, you know, Dallas, the Niners were playing, and I'd just go by myself, and it was cool. I had a great time. I'd always meet fun people, but I understand that not everybody fits into that mold of walking up to random strangers and whatever else. So we try to organize. We take over cities. They're invasions, man. And this is our 5th year doing it. Our first one was in 2019. COVID, you know, stepped sometimes away, but it's been 5 years that we've been planning these. And every single road trip that the 49ers are going on, we're planning a day before party. We're planning a tailgate party to walk to the game together. All Niners fans. It's incredible. Family friendly. Every event we ever do. So go check it out, 49ersrushroadtrip.com. If you got questions, there's a place to ask questions on there. It's pretty self-explanatory. So go check it out. I can't wait for this year because we're doing almost all the road trips and even the games I'm not going to. I'm not doing the Packers or the Dolphins, but we're still organizing parties for the faithful to get together. Even though I won't be at those, some of my team will be running those events, and just trying to create space for community and building relationships with great people like Kim and Johnny. I got to meet you and your wife in Seattle last year. That was awesome. It's been really cool just expanding the community from this virtual space to actual in-person relationships, which is huge.
And I love what you do with it. And I love the idea of it. I mean, it's like I love the spirit of it. It's kind of like George H.W. Bush. He had a policy.
Oh, wow.
He had a policy when he was in the White House. He hated broccoli so much he did not allow broccoli in the White House at all. Like, I love the spirit of that. If anybody comes in with broccoli, shoot them. It's just like the spirit of being so into something so much that you're that like into it. And that is what you do with the 49ers Rush road trip.
Thank you,
my wife and I had such an amazing time there, being able to get together with other 49ers fans, especially like it was just blocks away from Quest Field, or I want to say Quest Field. That's how I knew it growing up. Quest Field. Lumen Field now, yeah, it's Lumen Field, and then it was originally Quest, and then the Clink, because it was CenturyLink Field, and now it's a Lumen Field. But to be there in the heart of that area and just be around other 49ers fans, because I'm from Alabama and I don't get to be around very many 49ers fans. Period. Like if I see one at Lowe's, a guy wearing a hat, we're like,
oh, same.
One
of the biggest issues I've had in moving to the Bay, we're East Bay now, is I see somebody in Niners gear. It was the same thing. That's my best friend I've ever met. Like, we're going to have a conversation, but now it's everywhere. And so I still say like, oh, what's up, Niners? Like I've lowered it down a little bit to where it's not too in your face, but I can't help it, man. It's who we are, Johnny. It's who we are.
Yeah. I mean, it's like when you see somebody, when you have a really unique car and you see somebody else driving that car, you're like, hey, is that my new best friend? That's what it is. My daughter's T-ball coach, it turns out he's a 49ers fan. So we were just like, we became instant buds. We were able to bond. There's also some trauma bonds there that happen. But it's all good. And my son is riding around on his little bike, literally right underneath me. It's amazing. I was hearing this. What is that?
Life is good sometimes, man.
It is. Really it's cool. Amazing. But yeah, just if you have not been to a 49ers Rush road trip, you need to check it out. You need to go be there. I was so disappointed in myself. Trivia night. We had to name players from the active 53 roster, right? And I was so frustrated with myself because like it was so if you haven't been, here's what John does. You got to go. He starts on one end and people just got to say somebody on the 53-man roster. They have to be on the active roster. We got Wayne Breezy in the house. Let's welcome him in. But we got, you have to go down the line and say somebody there and you can't repeat. You can't repeat somebody that somebody else said. And so it was going good. I made it down. I think it was in like the top 6. I was feeling good, and I'm like, is this fair? I was starting to get a little overconfident. I'm like, is this fair? I mean, I'm literally like, I talk about the Niners all the time. I keep up to date with them. This isn't fair for everybody else. And it was coming down the line, and I had 2 names in my head. I think I was going to do Charlie Warner and somebody else. I can't remember now. See, I can't remember who it was. It was a safety. And we got down to the end, and the person right before me said my first choice. And then I totally blanked on my second one, and I was out, and I lost. I was so like ashamed. I'm going, I literally do this, and I couldn't.
You know what's funny? We've done that so many times, and Wade can tell you, it's the youngsters that win almost all the time.
All the time.
It's weird. It's the kiddos that we don't think pay attention when the family's watching the game. The kiddos know, man. Wayne, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing good.
I'm level 10 right now. There's nowhere else I'd rather be.
I know you are, because you planning and getting ready to be jamming and pretty soon with the Rush road trips, man. Like, I'm glad that schedule finally hit the fan, man. Johnny, thanks for having me. I apologize for my tardiness. I forgot I was at the gym, and I was like, oh, shoot. This is at 11:30 and not 12 p.m. So I was rushing. I was trying to get through the set. What's going on, Steven? I see him. I got my workout in too. That's why I'm late. My bad.
And thank you so much for being here, Wayne. I also want to give a big shout out to Steph Sanchez. She's
Yes.
a great friend of the show. I know she does a lot of stuff with you guys. We've done stuff together. Huge shout out. I mean, my goodness, how cool is that? Schedule release video, Steph with the 49ers in a collaboration, doing her Nick Bosa. That was like it was amazing. So big shout out to Steph for that. And I mean, she was great to hang out with at the Senior Bowl. We had such a great time. If anybody deserves some recognition for the 49ers, it was her. So got to give her some flowers. But with that, talking about the Senior Bowl, we are coming back to the NFL draft, and I know coming off of this, I know one thing we all do and everybody starts thinking about is immediately after the draft, you start grading the draft, right? How did the 49ers do? Especially when there's a draft when they have some head scratchers. Not quite like the Atlanta Falcons picking Michael Penix after giving Kirk Cousins a massive contract. I think that was the biggest shocker of the draft, but almost the second biggest one, I think, in that first round was the 49ers picking Ricky Pearsall. I had not seen a single mock draft with Ricky Pearsall going to the 49ers. And I think that it surprised a lot of people. It surprised me. I was kind of like, oh, okay. I didn't see that one coming.
The position made sense. The player was
right.
Shocked. Everybody had Ladd McConkey. Like, if you're going for that, like, that's your guy. We've met with them, all that stuff. But yeah, it was a shock, man. It was a shock.
And for me, I thought if they were going to address a player of that type, that it was going to be Luke McCaffrey. I'd really fallen in love with Luke McCaffrey through it. And I thought he was going to be like a late third, fourth round guy. And he ended up going at the end of the third. And so I thought
Adam Peters, who was with us for the whole draft.
Right.
There it is.
Right.
Just to say, every player that I wanted on the 49ers got picked by the NFC East 49ers. So I just want to put that up there that we did good job scouting. It's just that we were working for Adam Peters and not John Lynch this year. I just want to put that out there.
But that also shows how much you're able over the past drafts to get into Adam Peters' mind, right? And see things the way he sees it. So, it was really, and that's what I love too about going back and looking at these drafts, because we can give our draft grades, and you guys know this. We give our opinions, but in the end, we could be wildly wrong. We could be wildly correct. Only time will tell. And it really does take a while for that to happen. It takes longer than I think we would ever imagine, because we want to get it in like 2 weeks and know how good they did. But it really takes 2 to 3 years. And I think we really realized that coming off of when we did our last episode and we looked at the 2017 draft. And everybody, experts, us, had all graded that draft as an A+. Because they had gotten Solomon Thomas at number 3. They traded back, picked up extra picks. They got Reuben Foster at the end of the second round. And those two alone, everybody's saying that, the 49ers killed it. And then they got George Kittle later, which seemed like a pretty good upside guy. But Akella Witherspoon was going to be a player. And, they had all these things that made you think, okay, they really nailed that draft. And then 2018, the same thing. We looked at that draft and you think, coming off of it, you'd feel really good about what the 49ers did. They got a good right tackle when that was an area of need. They picked up this kid, Dante Pettis, who then, and what's fascinating too is even after 1 year, a year post-draft, we were all talking about how great that draft was, because Mike McGlinchey had a very promising rookie year. It seemed like if this was where he was going to be as his rookie year, we're going to be great. And he never really improved off his rookie year. Dante Pettis was coming off a season in 2018 when he had 7 touchdowns. And he was looking like he was emerging as the number 1 receiver for the 49ers. And he was this prototypical X receiver. They were counting on him being that, right? They went and drafted Deebo Samuel the next year. And going into training camp, Deebo was actually number 3 on the depth chart. Dante Pettis was number 1. Marquise Goodwin was number 2. And Deebo Samuel was number 3. Going into the Super Bowl, it was Emmanuel Sanders and Deebo Samuel who were
like real quick. Like if you look at Ricky Pearsall versus Dante Pettis, it makes so much sense, right? Because what was Pettis's issue is he was scared to get hit. Yeah, it was kind of a Jerry Jeudy Jr. And so then you look at Pearsall, that dude's fearless. He's not tough. He's not strong, but he does not care if you hit him. Like, that does not impact the fact that he's going to catch the ball. So, like, if you look at, okay, Dante Pettis, but you take the Madden adjustment and you do toughness from like a 62 to like a 95.
That rating always cracked me up in Madden. Like, what is toughness? Like, what is that? How does that change how my guy operates on the field?
You know exactly how
It's
it
called the
changes.
Dante Pettis scale.
I'm telling you, you know exactly how it changes.
And Kello Weatherspoon, that dude ain't got no toughness.
No.
And so
I call it dog. You call it toughness. You know, so same difference.
I had that video where it's like, that's my boy. He a dog.
He a dog. Yeah, you're speaking facts, man. You're speaking facts. And, you know, when you look at the Ricky Pearsall, draft, and you say to yourself, what was it? Now, he has a lot of abilities. And I think a lot of people will start to see that once he's utilized in this system. He has a lot of abilities. I really feel like he has the ability to play the X, the Y, and the Z when it comes to the receivers. How Kyle's going to utilize him, you know, that's to be seen. But at the end of the day, he can go across the middle of the field, catch a pass, get licked, get up, keep on ticking. And I think, you know, that's the NFL. Like, I miss those type of players. So I can't wait to see what he pans out to be. But, you know, to grade the draft now, we have to do it. It's what we do. But we know we're going to come back a year or two later to really give our true assessment. You know how they have those pass rush grades and then the true pass rush grade? Like, yeah, that's what we'll be doing in a year or two.
Yeah. You know, and what I love about the Ricky Pearsall pick is that, you know, what I love Juwan Jennings, and he brings a lot as far as beating man coverage and being able to do a lot of things on third down. That's why we call him third and Juwan, right? You need that guy in the slot who can do that kind of stuff. The problem with Juwan Jennings, and I love Juwan Jennings, he's a dog in the run game, right? He will block his rear end off, but he is limited in his speed and how much he can stretch the middle of the field. It's not always, people talk about stretching the defense and going deep. That's not just about what you do outside the numbers. People always think about that outside the numbers. But so much of the 49ers offense is about stretching down the seams between the numbers and the hash. Is if you can threaten those areas, because so many of the defenses now are about protecting your seams. It's about how do you account for the number 2 and the number 3 down the seam. And so, you know, it's just what Pearsall brings is more explosiveness down that seam and potentially the same sort of ability to win in the short area that Juwan Jennings does. That's why I like the pick. We will see if he turns out to be that. You know, as we all have said, time will tell. My wife is in the chat here. Look at her. She's in Oklahoma. She is about to fly out here pretty soon. She had to go be with some family, but that's why I'm looking like I'm in an office. People are saying it just looks like I'm chilling in a library. I put up a different background. I'm in my wife's office. I'm working from home right now with the show. That's why my son's in the background. You hear him every once in a while. But
I can't believe your wife listens to your show. First off, can
that's
we
awesome.
Just talk about how amazing that is?
Yeah, I mean, that's a round of applause. You know what I'm saying?
It's unbelievable. And my go-to, anytime Miss Chapman and I get into a little, you know, argument, I'm like, look, if you want to know my opinion, you should listen to my podcast. But you don't. So
I don't ask anymore. I'm at that point where, you know, that's where I am. But
yeah,
shout out to Mrs. Dell.
She'll usually pop in. She sometimes just puts it on like mute and just has it there, you know, just to help boost the algorithm. She'll support it. She's a great woman. You know, but sometimes she'll tell me, hey, did you see this news about the 49ers? I'm like, yeah, I talked about it on my show this morning. You were in the chat. She was like, oh yeah, I wasn't really listening. I was doing work, but she's there in the chat. So love her on that. But we're going to
the retention of the video stays up. You know what I'm saying? Like that's
right.
She's smart. Right. That's what it is.
She's heard me talk about it too many times. But we're going to dive back into looking through some past drafts. Last time we left off after the 2019 draft, which was a phenomenal draft when we look back on it. You know, the 49ers picked up. It was a head and shoulders above 2017 and 18. 17, yes, you got George Kittle. You didn't really get anything else. 2018, you got Fred Warner. Didn't get anything else. Now, those two players, again, kind of saved those drafts. If you really think about it that way, you can either say the 49ers really hit on that draft with a player, or you can say that guy saved the draft. Whichever way you're looking at it. 2019, first 5 picks were all money. They were all players who contributed big time. I mean, you had Nick Bosa, you had Deebo Samuel. When you get 2 all pros and a generational player in one draft, that's something. And then you get Dre Greenlaw, and you got Mish Wisnowski in there as well. That was a really, really solid draft. But we're going to look now at the 2020 draft. We're going to pick this up. So this is, again, when you start looking at different teams that have had good runs, like championship windows that open up and have those sort of things, you really can always trace it back to 1 or 2 years of really good drafts and being able to build through that and setting themselves up with that. And I felt like 2019 and then some of 2020 kind of really helped the 49ers in that have created what we're in right now as a championship window. So we're going to go through a few of these. My son's right here. He's coming up here with me. He's like, what is going on? So this was kind of a controversial year because the 49ers traded away DeForest Buckner. They let him go. And then they didn't re-sign Emmanuel Sanders, who was really,
they
Deebo
tried.
Samuel had a good, they tried a little bit, but the Saints offered him $8 million. I think the 49ers offered him $6 million was what the rumor was. And so they couldn't quite get him, but he
came back and said he wished he would have stayed after.
Yeah, he wished he would have. Yeah, he went and tried to go with the Saints, and that didn't really work out that year. But so with this was a year that's really interesting. We always talk about needs versus best player available. And this draft, especially in this first round, screamed drafting for need because they let Emmanuel Sanders go. They traded away DeForest Buckner. So what did they do with the 14th overall pick? They ended up picking in a trade from the Buccaneers. They ended up picking Javon Kinlaw, defensive tackle from South Carolina. And then later in the first round, they ended up getting Brandon Ayuk. They ended up trading up with the Vikings and got Brandon Ayuk, the wide receiver out of Arizona State that I know a lot of people didn't necessarily have on the board. I'm going to have to shut down this virtual background because my son's moving around and it's throwing everything. So everybody excuse my wife's office behind me. It was messing with me too much. I was getting really distracted. So, they end up much like 2017, they have 2 first-round picks, and they get Javon Kinlaw, and then Brandon Ayuk, and then they don't have any picks for 4 rounds.
Yeah, we traded for Trent during this time because we still thought Joe Staley was coming back. You remember day 1?
Yeah.
And then day 2 was like, okay, we're good, and then it was like, oh, Joe Staley's retiring, and it was like, doomsday.
Mm-hmm. Bum 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 bum.
Yeah.
What if I got that sound somewhere?
Thankfully, and the Redskins didn't want to trade him. Yeah, the squirrel.
Sorry, that's my fault. I wrecked it.
We'd watch way too much TV. There's way too much stuff going. All right, go ahead.
Y'all, I gotta bring it back on track here.
John, I miss you, bro.
I miss you. But we ended up, I keep wanting to say the Redskins, they're not.
That's what they were, anymore, I think, at that time. Though
they were still the Redskins. So the Redskins, they didn't want to trade Trent Williams to us. Dan Snyder was being full Dan Snyder and everything. Hey, bud. And they didn't want to give Trent Williams to the 49ers, and it ended up being Trent was like, no, that's where I'm going or nowhere else. And so, thank goodness that we ended up getting Trent Williams. So if you include Trent Williams with this draft, which I think you can, considering it's using the draft capital, again, we're talking about, and that's how I've looked at it, as 2019 and 2020 really set the stage for the championship window for the 49ers. But in round 5, they end up picking Colton McKivitz. So from West Virginia. And yeah, that was one, I think, I I don't know how to feel. We'll talk about that because I don't
I
know
got
how
a lot of
he's a
Colton
fifth round
McKivitz
pick.
talk. I got a lot of Colton McKivitz
Yeah,
talk.
I mean, he's a
ready to
fifth
go.
round pick. Round 6, they got Charlie Warner from Georgia, tight end. In round 7, Juwan Jennings. So it wasn't a really, a lot of picks. There was only 5 picks in this draft. But if you look at everybody in this draft and then include Trent Williams, everybody from this draft has played significant playing time or played a significant role with the 49ers. So while I think, Javon Kinlaw has not been the player that we wanted with the number 14 overall pick, it's hard to say he was an absolute bust. This is where it's hard. It's like when guys underperform, they're not a bust, but they're not a hit. They're not like a grand slam. It's like he was a player and he had some impact plays, but he wasn't the force that you were hoping for with the 14th overall pick.
I'd argue you don't win the divisional round against the Packers. You don't win the Lions game in the NFC Championship without Javon Kinlaw. Like this past, like not saying that it was worth the pick but you don't win those games without Kinlaw. He was the best defensive lineman we had in both of those games. I don't know. That dude came into his own and he got paid.
Yeah. And he got paid and deservedly so. And he's still, what's crazy about Kinlaw is that it feels like he still has not reached his potential. It's still like he's still growing as a player because injuries set him back so much. So Dave asks, what's it like to have a kid in your lap trying to take over a show? It's amazing. Wouldn't trade some of these times with my son for everything. He's a really chill baby. So
Dave's a good friend, and he's talking about his son Brandon. What's up, Brandon? If he listens to this, great kid. But whenever he comes on, he always wants to talk. Man, he's a talker. He's awesome.
He's pretty quiet. He's just real quiet. So as you can tell from sitting here. So Wayne, I'll kick it back to you.
Yeah.
Coming off of this 2020 draft, how did you feel? Did you feel like, like you did after 2017? Like, man, they just really addressed these areas and needs with some studs. They're about to get over the hump now. They had that horrible down year after 20. It was coming off of the Super Bowl loss. Man, they've got some pieces now. They're able to get over that hump and do that. Or you're like, they may have to reload for another year.
I was pretty numb at this point. I thought they hit the nail on the head in 2019. Getting Trent Williams numbed me. And so I didn't care about the draft anymore. I mean, I did, but I didn't really know at this time, like who we were looking to get. I do remember trading DeForest Buckner and saying, like, how are we going to replace that type of player with that type of production? So I think I was pretty stoked over the Kinlaw pick because I knew he was a monster coming out of South Carolina. He didn't have the same force as a Jadeveon Clowney, but you knew he was a big tree, like coming out of South Carolina at the time. So I thought that was a pretty good, solid, piece. You mentioned something about, calling him a bust or underperforming. And I think both of those two are negative. I don't think he underperformed. I don't think he overperformed either. But for a player like Javon Kinlaw, who couldn't really figure out his body and health, I think that was the main situation when it came to Javon Kinlaw. It wasn't that he was a bad football player. It's just his body just wasn't prepared properly for the NFL. And for some players, it just bees like that. And that's so weird, right? I pardon my English, but it's just so weird. Like his body just couldn't really adapt. And some players' bodies develop a little bit later and then they have long careers. So I thought, like John brought up some really good points. Yeah, we don't win certain games without Kinlaw. And I think the 49ers, you got to kudos to them for figuring out, oh, snap, we need more rotation here so we can get the best out of Kinlaw. And I think because of that, it helped Kinlaw stay healthy, and it helped Kinlaw produce more, and it helped Kinlaw sign to the New York Football Jets, which he will lose on week 1. And so I just think Kinlaw didn't underperform. He didn't underachieve. He wasn't a bust. He just, unfortunately, for the 49ers wasn't healthy. But then when you look at this draft and you say, well, we got Brandon Ayuk. We ended up with a top wide receiver in the NFL. Top 5, arguably.
You flip Ayuk and Kinlaw. Just flip their draft
Just flip
spots.
them, and then there you go, bro. And so, you're like, oh, snap, And then when you draft a lineman, I say rounds 5 and below. I mean, you're really taking a crap shot at somebody producing and becoming super well. And I know there's been over the history, not for the 49ers, but over the history of drafting linemen, some guys have hit 5th round or later. You got Colton McKivitz. Hey, man, it's a lineman. We're trying to kind of like fulfill a spot or whatnot, see if he develops. He was a gold helmet player. So, and now he's the starting right tackle. Did he struggle in 2023? Absolutely. But it was his first time, I think, starting that whole season, and we got what we got. So I thought overall my favorite pick out of this draft, believe it or not, was the Juwan Jennings pick, because I knew that they were getting a dog from Tennessee, and I didn't care. That whole situation was weird too, how it all ended up panning out. But I knew they were getting a dog, and I thought that was Kyle Shanahan really trying to establish the identity of what he wanted his wide receivers to do. We talk about no block, no rock. We talk about being just tough mentally and wired mentally tough and all that type of stuff. And I thought that's who Juwan Jennings was. But like you said, his measurables, those things didn't really pan out, the testing and stuff like that. But it panned out enough for the 49ers to spend the 7th round draft pick. And it seems like the 49ers are hitting on these 7th rounders. Now that I think back.
I mean, shoot. Their record in the early part of the draft isn't always amazing, but their like 5th and 7th rounders are just out of bounds. And I think, again, coming back to Kinlaw, what I do appreciate about the 49ers is that they recognized pretty early that they weren't going to just keep kind of waiting around for him to be that full-time starter. They went and they signed Javon Hargrave real quick. And I think they said, he's been an impact player at times, but he's not going to be a 70% snap guy that we can expect to hold down the fort. And some of that, again, is some of the health issues that he dealt with as he came into the NFL that nobody really knew about, that we didn't know were going to be issues. I mean, he essentially had full knee reconstruction. They had to really do a lot of work in there, and it takes time and it's hard to get there. And that's not the fault of Javon Kinlaw. But John, I like the point you had. If you swap the places that these two guys were picked, Brandon Ayuk and Javon Kinlaw, nobody has a problem with this draft.
Right.
And so, that's where I think we can, again, assign draft grades just based upon where guys were picked. If Javon Kinlaw is the 25th overall pick, everyone's going, yeah, that's not a terrible pick. If Brandon Ayuk is the 14th overall pick, people are saying, that was a really good pick. And so, it's interesting to also look back and see what was it that some, the national experts, well, air quotes maybe, about that have said over these drafts. And so if we look at the 2020 draft, Mel Kiper gave the 49ers a B- from ESPN. Mel Kiper gave him a B-. Here's what he said. San Francisco scooped up interior penetrator Javon Kinlaw, and he'll be a Buckner fill-in. He's cheaper than Buckner, of course, but does he have Buckner's ceiling? Then the 49ers traded into the 25th pick to get wideout Brandon Ayuk, a fantastic athlete who dominated in the Pac-12 last season. Shanahan is already fired up about how he'll use Ayuk, and quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo will love him. He apparently did not like the rest of the picks. So that was worthy of a B- grade. Andy Benoit from Sports Illustrated gave the 49ers an A-. He said the fact that the Niners traded up in the first or late in the first round to get Brandon Ayuk says they must be smitten with the Arizona State star. Stylistically, he fits their offense. Scouts liked Ayuk's effectiveness operating on the move, which is a key characteristic in Shanahan's timing-based offense. He has also shown he can align in a variety of positions. As for Kinlaw, coordinator Robert Saleh's scheme is predicated on having a potent four-man pass rush. The Niners rode that to a Super Bowl appearance last season. Chad Reuter gave the 49ers a B+. Vinny Iyer from Sporting News gave him an A-. Nate Davis from USA Today gave him a B+. Pro Football Focus gave the 49ers a B+. And what they said about Kinlaw, he's a physical specimen with the kind of pass rushing tools and production you love at the position, highlighted by an 18.1% pass rush win rate in 2019 that trailed, now this is fascinating, only Jordan Elliott in the class.
Who we got?
Who we just went and got after
Elliott, like he was my number 3 defensive tackle in that class out of Missouri. And Kinlaw, I had a full round grade separating them. but they've had a relatively close impact as far as longevity and all that kind of stuff that's going on. So it's very similar to the Eric Armstead to Malik Collins. Look, we're going to slightly maybe downgrade, but huge cap savings. And you do the same thing for Jordan Elliott to Kinlaw. It's interesting. The Niners, square peg, square hole. That's what they do.
I'm curious to know from the night. I wish we could sit down and ask John one day, Lynch, that is, was Derek Brown the guy? And did Carolina snipe you?
I mean, they got him at 7. He went at 7.
Right. But when you look at the other teams, he possibly, we don't know what other teams were looking at defensive tackles at that point. Everybody else seemed to address a different issue. Javon Kinlaw was the second defensive tackle off the board. So I'm curious to know, was Derek Brown that dude that was high, and then they went with their second choice first? This is what the Niners do, right? I'm curious to know, even from this past draft, who was ahead of Ricky Pearsall? Who was their number 1 guy, and then Pearsall might have been their number 2 guy. And they
found out about N'Keal Harry. That slipped out somehow. I don't know how you remember?
I don't.
The Debo N'Keal Harry thing. They wanted N'Keal Harry was their wide receiver 1.
Wow.
They wanted him over Debo, but
that's why people every time he got released, people were like, yo, go get him. Oh, wow. Why? I don't remember that, but that's crazy. So I'm just curious to know little slight things like that. It'll kind of help me paint the picture a little bit. But we went with Kinlaw, and like I said, we got what we got out of him.
Well, and the 49ers also, remember, if only 5 picks with what they did. They didn't have a lot of ammo in this draft. They had traded for Trent Williams, and they had used a pick, I believe, the year before to trade up as well. At some point, if I'm trying to remember right where it was. So they weren't in a position where they had just a massive amount of ammo to go get a guy. And I'm always leery of when you start moving from 15 into 7 or 8, because it's like the cost increase is so high, and there's so many uncertainties about that.
Bro,
Wayne is getting his mind blown right now,
because it's like I'm looking at the list, and if you rank these defensive tackles, I feel like John and I did this before. If you rank these defensive tackles, it's Derek Brown and Javon Kinlaw.
Madubuike went in the 3rd, though, and he wasn't good for the first.
I'm looking for him. Where in the 3rd did he go?
Justin Madubuike, he was 3rd round.
I see. I'm in the wrong round. I'm sorry. I'm in the 2nd round. Yep, he went in the 3rd. So it might be Derek Brown or Madubuike, Derek Brown, Javon Kinlaw, and look who we ended up getting. Look who we have. We got Jordan Elliott. Oh, this is what the Niners do, right? They draft players, and then they go back to that big board, and they wait to free agency, and then they go grab those players. They do it all the time. Christian McCaffrey's here. Talk about it.
They believe in their evaluation process, and so they will keep that into free agency. Because they will say, you know what? If we really believed in that evaluation process coming out of college, and a guy didn't work out, we are willing to say with another team, we're willing to say that was a fit problem there, or that was a coaching staff problem there, and they will believe in their evaluation process. We've seen that so many times. I mean, Kyle Shanahan talked about it, that Christian McCaffrey in 2017 was one of their biggest or best graded players in that draft, but they wanted to address the defensive line first. They had to address the defensive line. And so that's why they didn't pick Christian McCaffrey. Then when he's available, they go and trade for him. And Kyle Shanahan talked about that. It was what he knew about him coming out of college, of why he wanted to trade for him 2 years ago. It wasn't just because of what he'd done in Carolina. He believed in him from the draft evaluation process. So it's interesting that there's an interesting grade here from DraftWire. They gave the 49ers a C+, and this is fascinating to listen to. He says, I like Kinlaw a lot, but passing on both Judy and Lamb at number 14 after trading back a spot made little sense. Ayuk is a well-rounded receiver with potential, but he's not on the same level as those two, who are both top 10 talents in this draft.
Wow.
And that toughness, Jerry Judy skill, he's got a 62 on that one. So,
isn't that crazy? Like if you go back and rank the receivers in the first round, it's Justin Jefferson, maybe CeeDee Lamb. That's your 1-2, and then Brandon Ayuk has to be 3.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. 100%.
Yeah.
And Henry Ruggs is gone. Jerry Jeudy is trash. Maybe he'll have a new life, new leaf, or whatever you want to call it on his new
A
team.
new lease on life.
Yeah, maybe he went to Cleveland right now. I think he's with the Browns.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
You know, on Pro Football Reference, they do the weighted approximated value.
You got to show me where to get that. Okay, I'm looking at it. But
so, Brandon Ayuk's the 7th most valuable pick in this class, the entire draft, regardless of position.
T. Higgins was in that draft too, guys.
Herbert, Lamb, Jefferson, Wirfs, Burrow, Queen, Tua, Ayuk.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And that they base a lot of that on Pro Bowls and whatever, which Ayuk hasn't gotten yet. But you know, I'm taking Ayuk. If you ask me right now, CeeDee Lamb or Brandon Ayuk, I'm taking Ayuk in the 49ers system. But I would also take CeeDee Lamb in the Cowboys system. So you talk about fits and all those things. Now, Justin Jefferson, that's a completely different discussion. That doesn't even you're taking Justin Jefferson over everybody.
And you know what's funny too is looking back on that draft that Henry Ruggs was the number 1 receiver drafted out of that class. He was the first wide receiver off the board. Henry Ruggs III went to the Raiders at 12th overall.
Speed, man. It was speed.
Jalen Reagor went to the Eagles as 21st overall.
Yeah.
1 pick before Justin Jefferson. And
Eagles stay losing.
That's why the Eagles fans are still pissed.
Yep.
I mean, and there were some good receivers in this. Chase Claypool's been a productive receiver. He went in the 2nd round to Pittsburgh. But again, if you look at it, I think you're kind of, you know, number 1 would obviously be Justin Jefferson, and I think you would have a 2A and 2B with Brandon Ayuk and CeeDee Lamb. I think, again, depending on what system they're in, we've got to remember, Brandon Ayuk was on a team that threw the ball the least amount of times in the league, and he was still a 1,400-plus yard receiver. That, you know, if you look at his production and start saying, if he's on a team that throws the ball even 650 times, which is 150 more passing attempts than the 49ers had, which is not wild, by the way. The Detroit Lions were one of the more balanced teams in the league. They threw the ball 600 times. So,
wow.
You know, you're looking at that Brandon Ayuk is an 1,800-yard receiver. And so are we talking about Brandon Ayuk as, you know, if we're looking at him on another team and saying, well, yeah, that quarterback's looking really good. He's got Brandon Ayuk, one of the best receivers in the league. You know, much like we do with what we've done with the Vikings and Justin Jefferson, and we've said with different guys who have really good receivers. So I think, again, if the Raiders could go back and pick Brandon Ayuk with number 12, they would. And so he was definitely a great hit. Colt McKivitz, obviously, you got to start a year out of him. You went to the Super Bowl with him, and he did not cost you the Super Bowl. It wasn't the tackle position that cost you the Super Bowl.
No.
It was the interior offensive line. So you could, ostensibly, you can say you could win a Super Bowl with Colt McKivitz as your starting right tackle.
And they said that after the draft. They said that if the Trent Williams trade, we weren't going to budge on what we offered the 3rd and the 5th. And they said, you know, that we weren't going to budge on what we offered. With that 3rd round pick, John Lynch said we were going to take Colton McKivitz, and he was going to be our left tackle. Like that, he said that right after the draft. And so then they get him in the 5th, and, you know, the Colton McKivitz saga still continues. But good Lord, that's a whole different universe I do not want to play in.
Yeah. Big thank you to Lisa, big friend of the channel. I know she's oftentimes in you guys' channels and chats and everything. She's a great Niners fan, good friend of the channel. She says, good morning, my fellow 49ers faithful. Which Seahawks fans' life are you making miserable today? Me, my coworkers. So she's giving her coworkers a hard time today. Good job, Lisa.
As she should. As she should.
As you should. Yeah.
That is awesome.
Get after those Seahawks fans, the 12s, as they like to call themselves.
Call them the 12 because that's how many there are. We understand.
We call them the 12s because that's how many seconds they last in the playoffs. So,
there we go. Yeah, you can't find a fan that was a fan of the Seahawks before 2012. I mean, come on.
True.
The joke's right themselves.
There it is. Yeah, there it is.
Look, I lived in Seattle during from 2005 to 2008 or 2004 to 2008. They went to a Super Bowl. I literally was I'd gone to, I think it was Best Buy or Circuit City when Circuit City still existed back then.
That was my
And
store.
I
Circuit
was
City over
driving
Best Buy
back to
any day.
I was driving back to my dorm, and so the Seahawks actually leased their practice facility from where I went to college. So like we had our parking lot, one of our northern parking lots, and then there was a chain link fence, their whole facility, and then we had our on-campus apartments on the other side. And so like we saw the Seahawks all the time in the parking lot and everything. And I'm coming back from Circuit City, and I find myself behind these 3 or 4 buses. And this is at the end of January. 4 buses with a police escort. And I was like, well, what's this kind of going on? Realized it was the Seahawks coming back from losing the Super Bowl to the Steelers. You know how many fans were there to greet the Seahawks coming off their bus after they had just gotten back from the Super Bowl? Not even 5, Wayne. Because I pulled into the parking lot behind them, watched them unload. There was not even 5 fans there.
I'm so mad you didn't have a camera phone at that time. We were still rocking flip phones.
Yeah,
then.
This was 2006.
Like
Yeah.
the Razor.
I had
the Razor.
The Razor.
I didn't have a Razor. I did have a little flip phone, but it had a terrible camera, and you wouldn't even be able to see anything of it today.
Oh man.
Yeah, but I mean, it was like there were no Seahawks fans there, so you know I can tell you they were not very faithful then, and most of them they couldn't tell you who Steve DeBerge was or anything.
Wow.
So, they couldn't tell you that Jerry Rice played a season with the Seahawks, which still feels like an abomination to me. I mean, I get the Mike Holmgren connection, but whatever. But I think when we look back on this 2020 draft, we can say, look, 2019, 2020, when you look at the rosters from 21, 22, 23, that these teams that have gone deep into the playoffs, there's a bunch of players that have been hugely impactful on the 49ers from those 2 drafts.
I think it would be pretty difficult to find a team that had a better overall haul. They got 5 contributors that are almost all still with the team. We didn't even mention tight end 2 Charlie Warner, who had 2 great seasons with us. He went and got paid. Like, there's no misses. There are no misses, and that is rare. I'm not sure we're going to see that again. But this is my second favorite draft so far out of the Shanahan-Lynch era, 2019 to 2020. You said it earlier, Johnny. Those 2 back-to-back drafts have been the foundation of this long run. Yeah, good drafts. Good drafts.
Good drafts. And so then we get into, then 2020, though, it was hard to see that they were as good a drafts they were, because then 2020 happens. The team has, 8,000 players on IR. They end up, everybody misses time. It was a terrible season. And so the 49ers, they have Jimmy Garoppolo, who has 2 horrible ankle sprains, only plays in 6 games. We get to see the Nick Mullins experiment for a little while. CJ Beathard, then Nick Mullins, and everybody thinking, well, Nick Mullins will be a guy. And then that didn't turn out so much. I
remember people were saying he should be starting over Jimmy Garoppolo before.
I remember that.
Jimmy got hurt. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, that was a very fierce conversation, saying, because he had a stronger arm and could see the field better.
I will say I always have like a deep asphyxiation. Like, I love these people that have permanent dumb face, and Nick Mullins was in that category. And so like I always root for those guys. I don't know why. Daniel Jones a little bit. Like, I'm like, all right, cool.
He does have a lost in space face.
Yeah.
Daniel Jones. Gosh. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry. Let's go Nick Mullins.
So then that leads into having this horrible down year. 49ers have their starting quarterback has missed the majority of the season for the second time in 3 seasons. Jimmy Garoppolo missed almost the entire 2018 season, and it torpedoed the entire season. They go to the Super Bowl next year, 2019. He starts every game. 2020, he misses 10 games. It torpedoes the entire season again. I think Shanahan and Lynch went into this saying, we have lost 2 out of 3 seasons to a quarterback missing almost the entire season. We will not get a chance to finish a third. And so they went in and they said, we are going to address the quarterback position. We are going to invest in this. We're going to have large investment, considering they had paid Jimmy Garoppolo, and they ended up keeping him on the team after this draft. But they traded away 3 first-round picks to move up in the first round of the 2021 NFL draft to pick Trey Lance, quarterback out of North Dakota State. In the second round, they picked Aaron Banks, guard out of Notre Dame. 3rd round, Trey Sermon, running back out of the Ohio State. Round 3 again, they ended up making a trade. They traded up for Trey Sermon, if we remember right. So they traded up for Trey Sermon.
That's your pick.
They they ended up then with their 3rd round pick picking Ambry Thomas, cornerback out of
Michigan.
That's Wayne.
Round 5, they picked Jalen Moore, offensive tackle out of Western Michigan. Round 5, they picked Diamador Lenore, cornerback out of Oregon. Round 5 again, they had 3 5th-round picks.
3
Crazy.
fifths.
They kept trading
all
up.
with the team still.
Yeah.
They picked safety Talanoa Hufanga from USC. Round 6, Elijah Mitchell, a running back out of Louisiana. This is a fascinating draft. We'll talk about what the experts said, and then we'll dive into this. So Mel Kiper coming off of this, much like he did in 2020, he gave the 49ers a B- on this draft grade. If he's anything, I think Mel Kiper gives a lot of like B- B because
it was the Trey Lance pick for sure.
Well, it's kind of like, on The Price is Right when they would have.
Oh, yeah.
When they
$1.
would have like.
The over under.
Like the over under, and
that's when I learned about over under, yo. Like I didn't know what the hell that was. You watch Prices Right, you can figure it out.
Hey, I will say if you have Amazon Prime, they got the Bob Barker era running 24/7 on the price on Amazon Prime. Yeah, it's crazy. That's a side.
Don't forget to neuter your pets,
into.
ladies and gentlemen.
Your pet's spayed or neutered. But it's like, people, when you see people on the over under and they'll sit there and be like, you only have so many numbers you can be off, and it's the new car, and they pick a 9. Everybody gets really mad at them, right? Because either you're on or you can cost you a ton.
Yes.
You'll be way off. I feel like Mel Kiper always kind of gives himself like, if he gives us a B- and we have an A- draft, he wasn't that far off. If he picks a B- and we get a D+, he wasn't that far off. Like,
it's the safe grade.
I think he.
I
think he
love
gives
Mel
safe grades.
Kiper. I appreciate everything he's done for the industry, but it's turned into Mel Kiper's biggest Mel Kiper fan. And it's just like, it's like, all right. And I'm still going to listen to him and I'm still going to watch all that stuff. But it's just like, this bit is about over. We'll see. But shout out to Mel.
So here's what he said. He said, I wasn't high on the 49ers' day 2 haul as Aaron Banks, Trey Sermon, and Ambry Thomas were all reaches on my board. I watched all of Banks' snaps at Notre Dame, and I'm not sure if he is a definite rookie starter. Sermon is a patient runner without top-tier suddenness, and I was surprised he went there and this high based on Shanahan's past getting production out of undrafted backs. Talanoa Hufanga doesn't have great measurables, but he could find a role on the defense. Running back Elijah Mitchell ran a 4.33 40 dash at his pro day. That's really all he said about Elijah Mitchell. He ran really fast.
Did you talk about Demo, the best pick of the draft?
Nope.
That wasn't a day 2 pick though yet. That's why.
Yeah. So
he was right on day 2. He hit 3 for 3.
Yeah, Connor Orr from Sports Illustrated. He gave the 49ers an A-. So this is what's fascinating looking back on this draft, because you're going to see a common theme here. He said, Trey Lance should scare the pants off the rest of the NFL. Kyle Shanahan has had great mobile quarterbacks and great pocket passers, but never this combination of size and speed. In the past, he's admitted as much. Rarely has he had the opportunity to force defenses into treating the quarterback as a rusher. Lance is powerful and athletic and could revolutionize a system that is already taking the NFL by storm.
Damn.
And just dripped down.
We drafted Aaron Banks and Creed Humphrey went to Kansas City at 63.
That everybody talks about Trey Lance. That's the miss. That is the miss.
That's the miss.
That is the
and
Trey
look,
Lance was a miss. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, for sure. Huge miss. But and I'm not taking any shot. I love my boy Aaron Banks, and that was but for me, you know what it was when it was Aaron Banks? It was a scratch my head pick for me. Why? He didn't fit the zone run. Like that, his body type, his footwork, where we switch into power gap, where we switch into power runs and things like that, which we do a combo now. So now it makes sense. But at that moment, the reason why I would scratch my head at that pick is because he's not quick to get outside. He's not the guy you want out there. And so he wasn't here. He didn't get drafted to start his rookie year, though. I do remember that because we still had Lake and Tomlinson, remember? And so that left side was showed up. I'm sorry, you could run to the left side and you sleep, okay? Yeah. We had Trent and Lakin. And so it was good, Aaron Rodgers. But he was another person that had to get his body right? Like, he had to get his body right for this system. And so I think we're going to get the best year from him this year. He's going to, it's contract year, and he is going to ball out. I could feel it. But Creed Humphrey wins 63.
And you remember we traded back because the conversation, we were on the board, I think it was like, I don't know, 44, 45, whatever. And Asante Samuel Jr. is who everybody wanted.
Damn it, John.
We fell back 5 picks, and then Asante Samuel went right ahead of us. Now, it turns out they were right. Asante Samuel had a great rookie year. He's not even a starter anymore.
Then he dropped, yeah.
And so, like, they were right there, but I didn't even grade Banks because I was like, oh, this is a power gap scheme only player. And this started the shift, which they wanted to do with Trey Lance, Trey Sermon, Banks. We're going big. It's not just going to be outside zone, more inside zone, more power
runs,
all that stuff.
Yeah.
And transitions kind of taking place. Now the Niners are much more multiple than any Shanahan point, in Shanahan history, Daddy Shanahan included. And I think Banks was a part of that. But again, he returned to pre-injury Aaron Banks. I thought he was on a Pro Bowl trajectory after the first 3 weeks of the season in 2020.
Then he got injured.
Then he got re-injured, and his play bad. So I'm hoping he returns. But if he doesn't, the Niners just drafted 2 guards. And so they're basically giving him the Jimmy G treatment. Hey, bud, you got 1 year. If not, we got 2 guards waiting in the wings.
Yeah. And, Chad Reuter gave the Niners a B+, high marks for Trey Lance. And then he said, I can't wait. Banks will help form a wall in front of Lance. Sermon is worthy of a 3rd-round value at running back, and Thomas has potential to stick in the secondary. Lenore will compete with Thomas for playing time as a rookie, and Hufanga could be a very good nickel safety in the future. Picking Mitchell in the 6th as a returner and backup carrier was solid. Vinny Iyer from Sporting News gave the 49ers an A-. He said, much of this grade is tied to the smart, aggressive trade-up for Lance's unlimited upside in Kyle Shanahan's offense as a big-time passer and runner with high football intelligence. Banks and Moore boost their interior blocking, while John Lynch found excellent safety values for the future in Thomas and Hufanga. Sermon and Mitchell reload Shanahan's always productive zone rushing attack with more big play elements. Nate Davis from USA Today gave the 49ers a B. Most of that was found with Trey Lance, except for he says this 3rd-round running back, Trey Sermon, could be one of this draft's heists. Pro Football Focus gave the 49ers a B. And this is what they said. Sermon could very well end up being the best running back in this class. He doesn't possess elite speed, but he breaks tackles and has tremendous contact balance. Still, trading up for a running back isn't going to be a great value pick. He needs to lower his shoulder pads a bit more on contact, and even though he doesn't have long speed, he does have great agility and elusiveness. And the analytics site feels Thomas's size and college scheme will allow for a smooth transition to the NFL. Talking about Ambry Thomas, says he's fast and plays physical, but still isn't that strong. The problem with Thomas is that we don't know much about him. He was a former 4-star prospect, but didn't play into 2020. So he only has 672 snaps from 2019 and the 104 snaps from 2018 under his belt. He's a big unknown. Luke Easterling from DraftWire gave the 49ers a B. And, he said, he did say Talanoa Hufanga is a sleeper of a day 3 pick at safety, and there's plenty to like about the depth. Danny Kelly from The Ringer gave the 49ers an A. And so a lot of this was based upon just responding to the guys in the chat here, is responding to, or is based upon the Lance pick. And, this is, what'll be fascinating about this. And we'll end up doing part 3 because this is just too much fun. And there's so much meat on this bone. There's a lot more meat on this bone than I think I ever really imagined. But that this draft, you really end up having to put Trey Lance in 2021, in 2022, and in 2023, because each of those drafts did not have a 1st-round pick because of Trey Lance.
Correct.
Now, you also have the flip side that we have, looking forward to maybe part 2 or part 3 is, does the Brock Purdy pick in the 7th kind of make that a wash? And everything. See, what's really hard for me is my absolute draft crush, the player I thought was my number 1 player on the board that year of every player in the draft, was Patrick Surtain. That was my guy. Now, some of it was because I like Alabama. I'm in Alabama. And so there was a little bit of homerism there, but I felt like he was the best player in this draft. Now, you can make a an argument that Jamar Chase is the best player in the draft with what he's done. But Patrick Surtain, I think when you talk about a lockdown corner, I think he's going to be one of the top 3 corners in this league for the next 10 years.
Coach got fired though right after he picked him.
Which is a little wild.
Would the Niners take a cornerback top 10 overall? Do they believe in that? We just had the earliest corner taken by the Niners in the end of the second round. Like, would they do a top 12 pick if they stayed at 12? He went 9. So do you trade up?
He went 9 to Denver.
But you're right. There's only 5 players that got all pros in this whole draft class so far. Micah Parsons, Penei Sewell, Amon-Ra, Surtain, and Talanoa Hufanga. You got one of the 5. But it's funny. Jamar Chase, who I think personally is probably one of the better players in this draft, he didn't even have an all pro. He's got 3 Pro Bowls.
Wild. It's wild to think about. Jamar Chase is not an all pro, but I mean, there's been a lot of good receivers in this league, and some of it almost starts to feel like lifetime achievement awards for some of the guys. That's kind of how I felt last year. There were some of those, but it's also fascinating too to look at this draft, and then you can make an argument of Kinlaw. A big shout out here for Bobo with the super chat. He says, we're going 13 and 4 and finally winning 6 after 30 years. Thank you.
Can I say something real quick about Bobo? Bobo has gone through the Super Bowl hangover trajectory, and now he's on the other side. And Bobo, I really do appreciate all that you do and you share. But this dude we all were hurting. And Bobo used to bring the pain every episode for like the last 2 months. But Bobo, I don't know what you drank this morning in your coffee, but keep that up, buddy.
He's feeling it again. He's finally kind of worked through the process. He's worked through the 5 stages of grief, and he's on the other side. Love it. When you look at maybe Javon Kinlaw as not an absolute hit, but wasn't a total bust. But you think about him, and then this next draft with Ambry Thomas, who had very little playing time, with Trey Lance, who had very little playing time. And the struggles those guys had in adjusting to the NFL game. That's really, if you look at those 3 guys, the book on them and their biggest issues have not been physical talent. It's been adjusting to the NFL game. Javon Kinlaw, there's been some technique issues, I think, understanding how we're operating in the scheme. Trey Lance, obviously not able to get in there. Ambry Thomas has just had wild lapses of his responsibilities and technique in coverage. It's so frustrating. Like, he will be there in a cover 2, and it's like, you're supposed to drop back to 15 yards depth on this if you see this coming, and then come and close, and you don't, and you give up a touchdown. That's the kind of stuff that is wildly frustrating with that. Or not reading the number 2 release correctly on a read to coverage. Those things frustrate you. And so I think if we look back 2023 and 2022, what is the number one thing throughout those drafts, or 2023 and 2024, is experience. Is they pick guys with experience.
Yeah.
Because you see that they've done this where we say guys didn't have a lot of playing time, but we like the upside, and it doesn't work out. And now they're saying we're going to get guys who've proven they can play.
I have a question. All right, I want to do just a real quick alternative universe, whatever. Let's say the Niners stayed at 12 and the board fell exactly like it fell. Okay. I'm curious. I don't know if you guys could do this. Who would you have taken and who would you take now? Just real quick, because this is something that's plagued me. Now, Micah Parsons went 12, but I can tell you right now, he was not on the 49ers board after Reuben Foster. He's the off the field stuff. He was only on the Cowboys and Chiefs board. That's all that anyway. So let's just say they stayed at 12. No Trey Lance pick. Out of these players, these are the players that were still on the board: Rashawn Slater, Elijah Vera Tucker, Mac Jones, Jalen Phillips, Kwity Paye, Christian Darrisaw. Like, who is it that you think the Niners would have taken, and who would you have taken? Does that make sense? So I'll go through the names again: Rashawn Slater, Elijah Vera Tucker, Mac Jones, Jalen Phillips, Kwity Paye, Christian Darrisaw. Like, what should they have done? And what would you have done? Wayne, what do you think, man? Did any of those names pop to you?
Yeah, man. Like, it was Rashawn Slater for me. Look, I would have been trying to, you invested all this money in this quarterback, or you were going to invest the money in the quarterback. Either way, you had Jimmy Garoppolo at the time. So why not invest in the offensive line? Like, make sure And we were so used to going in the trenches, whether it was offensively or defensively, and you had the ability to get one of the top linemen in this draft. Rashawn Slater was the guy. Like,
Can play inside, outside.
He can play inside. We talk about versatility all the time, and the Niners like versatile players. It should have been, to me, it should have been in Slater, and they could have probably looked to address a quarterback a little bit later if they were looking to move on from Jimmy Garoppolo. But the Niners, there's so many different factors, but I would have went with Rashawn Slater for me.
What about you, Johnny?
Sorry, my mic muted because my boy was here. For me, going into that draft again, I was thinking about the team a little bit differently again from what the 49ers really kind of looked at it. Because, for example, they don't draft running backs high. They love their
Correct.
draft their running backs in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round. For me, I was kind of salivating over the thought of Najee Harris in this offense.
Ooh.
Just because, again, Alabama, I was feeling that way. But if you remember the previous year, we had nobody stay healthy at running back. Raheem Mostert was constantly injured throughout the year. He had shown explosiveness, and I was thinking, okay, if you can provide stability and that explosiveness long-term with the 49ers, Raheem Mostert had not played more than 8 games in a row at this point in his career, and he'd been in the league 5 years by that point. He had the great playoff run with the 49ers in 2019, but if you remember, he was not even the starting running back that year. At the beginning of the year, he didn't take over the starting role till like week 9, week 10. And so, then he was hurt all the time. And then his history proved the next season, 2021, he got hurt literally 3rd play of the season, right? It was like 3rd or 4th play of the season, hurt his knee and was gone the entire season. And that's when we started to see Elijah Mitchell that came in. So, for me, I was really thinking about Najee Harris. I didn't think the 49ers would pick him because they just don't seem to value running backs there. He was a guy I was really high on. I would have been fine with Jalen Phillips because I think
Jalen Phillips.
He was one of my draft crushes.
But after Kinlaw, it's like, why?
Yeah, that was hard.
But he was an edge rusher, so
I felt like he could be what they wanted Solomon Thomas to be, which is a guy who can play inside or outside.
The only thing that struck me issues with him was the health, the health coming out of college and the serious injury that he had coming out of college. But man, he was a force. He's the one that injured Jimmy Garoppolo.
And I mean,
it's a long list.
Okay,
put it like this: Jalen Phillips is responsible for Brock Purdy being great. I will leave it at that, because if he didn't injure Jimmy Garoppolo, we wouldn't have known who Brock Purdy was.
You guys know who hurt Aaron Rodgers, right? With the Achilles last year?
Yeah, we talk about Leonard Floyd. All right, I see what we're doing right here. I see where we're going.
Yeah. And I mean, I already went on record earlier in this episode that I was a big Patrick Surtain fan. Like, I really liked, those were my guys kind of coming out of that draft. Now, who did I foresee the 49ers picking that year? I went on some shows earlier. I thought they were going to pick Mac Jones. I really did. Again, maybe I'm showing my tilt here by saying Patrick Surtain, Najee Harris, and Mac Jones. You
got a brand. Stick to it, man.
That's funny.
Look, Najee Harris is a great player. Patrick Surtain was a great player. It wasn't just I saw a lot of them and saw that they were good. Now, Mac Jones, that has not worked out, obviously. Nobody but Trevor Lawrence has worked out, and he has been like, we're just gonna still see how that goes. They may just be stuck in mid zone for a long time. But that draft was terrible for quarterbacks, and so I don't know. But that's a fascinating draft to look back on, because it was like the 49ers, again, we saw 2019, 2020, phenomenal drafts. If 2021, the upper end of that draft had been different, maybe we're talking about something different here. But they still had some hits in that draft. I mean, I don't think it was a bad draft by any, the Trey Lance thing obviously makes it real tough, because
does it really though?
But because you get Brock Purdy, I don't see it as that bad, considering that you get Diamador Lenore, Talanoa Hufanga, Aaron Banks, and Elijah Mitchell. I mean, you got 4 starting caliber guys here. Elijah Mitchell has had injury problems, but he was the starting running back the year we went to the NFC Championship game. Played a massive role in the 49ers getting there. Deommodore Lenoir has been a starter for 2 years at the 49ers. Aaron Banks has been a starter. Talanoa Hufanga has made an all-pro. I think even when you factor in what Trey Lance has
only
not
all-pro
into
from this draft, huh?
You know, you're going, if I get 1 all-pro and 3 starters out of this draft, even 2 starters, 1 all-pro and 2 starters, I'm feeling good about this draft. I think the over expensive Trey Lance makes it a little bit harder, but I wouldn't say the 49ers bombed this draft.
No,
I don't even with the miss on the Trey Lance, which we won't really know if it's a miss, like, because I don't think he played enough for us to even evaluate the miss. Just like we said, we would come back in 2 years and reevaluate and regrade, right? So Trey Lance didn't do much of anything. He got injured, and I think, you know, with them drafting Brock the next year helped them kind of move away from the Trey Lance thing. I'm not saying it replaced Trey Lance as far as the value and making up for it, but it definitely allowed them to move forward into what they were trying to do. But when you look at the Trey Lance, the move up to get Trey Lance, it might have affected the draft and over the next several years, but it didn't affect the team. And what do I mean by that? Well, we were able to pay just about every mother freaking expensive player we needed to pay on this team because of trading up to get that first round quarterback and having money to be free to pay your Fred Warners, George Kittles, Deebo Samuels, Brandon Ayuk soon to come, and all these top players that we were paying to keep this team competing for a Super Bowl championship. So in a way, they would have did that to get any one of these quarterbacks. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know if Mac Jones would have been better. I don't know if Justin Fields would have been better in this particular system, because at the end of the day, Trey Lance gets injured on a design run play up the middle with these guys that we said we drafted for Trey Lance, the Aaron Banks and those type of dudes. So it's crazy to figure out. Like, I know to say he was a bust is hard because he didn't play to be a bust. But
it was a bust for us though, because
definitely
we never got
was a
the
bust.
return.
We didn't get the return.
We got a 4th rounder.
But you got to think about. I kind of look at it for the simple fact that you got to look at it in hindsight and say, well, we moved on from him. We did get a 4th round pick, and we're still competing for a Super Bowl. Like, so, yeah, was he a bust for us? For sure. But we don't know if he's going to be a bust as a player because he just hasn't played much.
My favorite thing, and I still look back at this, I still feel the same way. I want a team that swings for the fences. Like, I do not want average, look, let's just get a guy like Mac Jones. Like, I don't want that. Like, you swung for the fences. You missed. You struck out.
I agree with that. But to ask the question, like I see a question, then why did we draft him if we weren't sold on him?
I don't believe that.
Maybe they were sold on him. And on top of that, they were sold on getting a quarterback. Maybe they were sold on getting Trey Lance.
When Brock Purdy stepped in, it was like, man, everything else doesn't matter anymore.
Right. So and you got to look at it like that. Plus, you're not paying Trey Lance a lot of money. And so you got to look at it in the simple fact that, boom, we're able to keep this team, keep this core, keep everything together on a cheap quarterback contract. You know what I'm saying? Now it's even cheaper because now we went and we landed this Brock Purdy guy. And so, like, it's even cheaper. So I don't know, man. I wish Trey Lance would have been able to produce, and then it'll be a different kind of, we'll have a different conversation. They probably still would have moved on from him. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. We bust on him. We missed on him. It was a whiff.
Well, and another thing that we have to remember the context of time at this point, because coming off of the 2020 season, there were almost no in-person games. That the NFL lost, had a revenue decrease to the greatest extent they'd ever had. I'm not saying boo-hoo for the owners, whatever. It was more, again, you have to understand the CBA is dependent upon percentage of revenue as far as the salary cap. The salary cap is set off of percentage of revenue. It's like 66%, it's like 66 point something % of revenue that comes in, averaged over every team is what the salary cap is set at. So the salary cap was, unless there was going to be a settlement between the Players Association and the NFL, which they had not agreed to by that point, that the cap was projected to drop to like $140 million. So what the NFL ended up agreeing to is saying, instead of having all of these losses in 1 year, we're going to spread it out over 3 years. But it was still $30 million a year. That's why the cap is going up so much this year, because we're seeing the COVID era drop-offs or spread out drop off. That's why the cap is going up so much this year. It's like $45 million this year. So every NFL team lost $90 million over 3 years that they could spend on their cap. And that's where the 49ers were at, is they're saying, how do we best navigate $90 million lost over 3 years? Where is the number one area you can get savings? And where is an area that we have lost 2 of our last 3 seasons? A quarterback who's taking up huge cap space, sitting on the bench on IR, that we cannot trust to stay on the field.
And that's my argument.
And that's why they went into this draft saying, we need to get a starter at quarterback in this draft. That was their goal. That was what they were going for. And it had as much to do with on-field as it also did with cap management, exactly like what you're talking about, is that the 49ers have been able to weather through this cap era while being able to keep all of their major stars. There's very few teams that can actually say that. People, I think we get locked into the 49ers. We say, they've let this guy go, or they didn't go pursue this free agent or whatever, but they're one of the only competitive teams that has been able to keep their entire high-end core. I mean, the Eagles last year had to let 4 starters on the defense walk. They've just had to let more starters on defense this year walk. We look at they signed AJ Brown to a big record deal. They signed Jalen Hurts to a big record deal. They've got their offensive line, but they have also had to let a number of guys walk, and they were cheeks at the end of the year last year on defense because they let so many of those players walk.
You know what's one thing we don't talk about enough is the active cap spending. We talk about the cap and all that stuff, but the Niners are better at this than anybody. If you look at like the actual cap, the 49ers have $281 million they get to spend this year. That's the best in the NFL. The next closest team is the Browns at $260 million. The 49ers are allowed to spend $21 million extra this year over every other NFL team because of how they handle their bonuses and because of how they handle just rolling the cap forward. They're consistently the best in the NFL at it, and I think that's a big reason why we get to keep a lot of these guys, not named Eric Armstead, but I don't know. I'm sorry. I was trying to piggyback off that. I'm with you. Man,
no,
shout
it's
out to
absolutely
Zach.
Fantastic. Big Zach. Shout out to Zach. Thank you so much for the massive super chat coming in. He says, if you swap Trey Lance and Brock Purdy draft positions, nobody would be talking about how many picks we wasted. I think we did just fine. And that's absolutely true. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about Trey Lance. I've always said, I feel like, any Big Bang Theory fans out there would know, I've said Trey Lance is the biggest Schrodinger's cat in the history of the NFL. In the sense that if you've watched the Big Bang Theory, Schrodinger's cat is an idea that there's a cat inside of a box and the box is sealed and you don't know. The question is the cat alive or dead? But you can't look in the box.
It's both.
And so, yeah, it's both. But you can make an argument for either one. You can make an argument that it's dead because you can't observe it being alive. You can make an argument for being alive, but you can't observe that it's dead because it's a mystery in there. It's inside there. So because you can't know it's either one, it's both at the same time. And I think that's exactly what we have with the Trey Lance argument. We always have, he is both. Could have been a great quarterback. Could be a great quarterback. He's an absolute bust. That both are true at the same time. The cat is both alive and dead. And I think that's what we've seen in Trey Lance because there was such a mystery there. The physical potential is so high, but we never have been able to see what he would have needed to be successful, which the 49ers always talked about, which they wanted him to be able to figure out playing quarterback in games. That was the idea, was put a strong running game around him, allow him to use that running game so that they could win games while he figured out playing quarterback. Kyle Shanahan has said that exact thing. He said that in press conference. He said, we felt that we could have a good enough team around him to win games and keep us in it while he figured out to play quarterback. And then he would really be getting where we wanted him to be by the end of a full season of starting. And so they wanted a long runway for him. What changed that is that he got hurt. And then Brock Purdy came in and they found out this guy Didn't need a runway. He was an aircraft carrier. He shot off the deck, and he was performing amazingly. And so we don't even have to play the what if game with Trey Lance, because now we know the cat's out of the box, and we know it's alive and well and is doing great. And so that was the moment they just shifted over to say, we're fully investing in Brock Purdy. And so, somebody had said, how can you say this was not a bust draft with considering what happened to Trey Lance? And I go, again, if we go back to 2017, it's really hard for people when you look at that draft, because we got George Kittle. There's a lot of people who won't say we got an F in that draft. Why? Because we got George Kittle. If one player getting all pro and being one of the best at his positions is enough to save an entire draft that included 2 first-round picks, why is the draft that then you get 1 all pro and you get 2 other starters and another guy who gave you an entire starting year out of the same draft? Why is that a bust, even though you spent 3 first-round picks?
What I want to do,
end, I think it's great.
I want to look at like the other 32 teams and like where they are now and say like, where that fits, because it's like, look, if they finished with the 15th most value from this draft class out of 32 teams, is that a bust? I'm not saying that's where they end up, but it's like we're looking at this just like the tree. We're not looking at the forest, right? The team got better. Diamador Lenore could be one of the core building blocks for a decade. Like you talked about, if you redid the draft, you would take your Alabama corner. And I'm not saying Diamador Lenore is that, but I'm telling you, he's closer to that than he is Ambry Thomas.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I think the future is going to be built defensively around Diamador Lenore. I think after this offseason, they're going to let Charvarius Ward walk, and Demo's going to be our number 1 corner for another 5 to 6 years. That's worth the top 12 pick. We didn't draft him there. We drafted him in the 5th round, number 172 overall. But like, there's a lot of value in this draft. I really do think that's the case.
Well,
See, I think that what makes that tough, though, John, is that, and I agree, but what makes it tough is Lenore is a free agent. And so the Niners have a number, and Lenore is going to have a number. And if he makes all pro this year, it's going to cost the Niners more. And then there's going to be teams that's going to pay him more. Yeah. And so you want him to be that building block. You want to build that. But this is why I think they drafted corners. You get your Renardo Greens. You get your guys to come in here. You got guys, Darrell Luter Jr., Samuel Womack III, a couple of years prior, because you're hoping that they develop into what Diamador Lenore developed just in case that scenario ends up playing itself out. I agree with you about Ward. I think Ward's going to go get another contract, probably one of his final contracts. And like you said, you're hoping you could build with Lenore, but it's not up to the 49ers. It's up to Lenore. And I think that's what makes the game a little bit dangerous. So,
yeah,
it's just tough. But you're right. That's who you want to build that secondary around. Like, you want to build it around Lenore. He is one of the top DBs in the league. Hands down.
Like we go ahead. Sorry.
Well, it's fascinating too. I mean, just kind of looking at this quarterback conversation, especially from that draft, every team that drafted a quarterback in the first round in that draft, there's only one that made the playoffs. That's Trevor Lawrence.
Oh,
no, there's only one team that made the playoffs last year, and they went to the Super Bowl, and that was the 49ers.
49ers, yeah.
So they're the only team that has made it through that draft class and been successful. If you even look at, the top 10 picks in that draft, the teams that are there, you have Jacksonville, the Jets, San Francisco, the Falcons, the Bengals, the Dolphins, the Lions, the Panthers, the Broncos, and the Eagles. It's a 50-50 shot whether they made the playoffs this year. I mean, half those teams were picking in the top end of the draft again. And, then you can go even to the number 11th pick, and you have Chicago with Justin Fields, who has just had the number 1 pick in the draft and picked Caleb Williams is going for quarterback again. So, yes, can we say the 49ers whiffed on that? They whiffed less than any other team, in my opinion, as far as a team from this draft, than any other team out of that draft class, because they're the only team to have success that drafted a quarterback in the first round that year that has, they made it to the Super Bowl. Jacksonville did not even make the playoffs, and they had the best quarterback out of that class. So the fact that the 49ers still were able to add pieces there, that the 49ers were able to still have a roster, a Super Bowl worthy roster, is a testament to the 19, 20, 21 drafts that were able to keep feeding this cycle. And then, good moves in free agency. And then obviously, we'll talk a little bit more maybe next one, Brock Purdy, because what's fascinating is that people will say that this draft was a bust, but look at the next draft and say that was an absolute win because you get Brock Purdy. When you look at the cast off of the next draft.
Yeah, but that's the only player you get.
Right. Like the next draft is an absolute turd. Like it's not good right now. So it's a fascinating conversation, because if you put these two drafts together, the two of them together, 2021, 2022, I think you would say that's phenomenal. But if you look at either of them, people can make a real argument that they're both stinkers. But
and that's why I said that the Trey Lance whiff is the reason for such the low grade, or the outlook especially from the fan base. It's that, but they're not looking at the value in moving up to get a quarterback, whether it was Trey or any quarterback. They're not looking at what the 49ers were really doing. So if the 49ers did hit on Trey Lance, it's a win-win. If the 49ers, they didn't hit on Trey Lance, well, at least we were able to keep the core here and still compete for Super Bowls based off of what we brought in, the other players that we evaluated. So it's still a win-win. It's just that quarterback value, that position takes up everything. And so when you look at 2022, literally when we get into that, the next time we do our show, it's Brock Purdy and none of these other guys are even on the field. I mean, maybe Spencer Burford, maybe Drake Jackson, but other than that, it's crazy.
Yeah, and again, going back to what that move made was allowed the 49ers to commit cap planning wise to 2022 not having Jimmy Garoppolo's contract on the books.
Right, which was 20 plus mil. Remember that?
Right. The moment that they drafted Trey Lance, whether or not anything, they committed that by 2022 Jimmy's contract was going to be off the books,
and they brought it back, but it was way cheaper.
They restructured him. It was not going to be under his 2022 contract structure.
Y'all remember when they had him throw it on the side fields?
Yeah.
Yes.
That was awesome, man.
I remember so many people. So much. I remember. Yeah.
Listen,
there's clearly they do not like each
other.
They're
can't stand each other.
Like oil and water.
Can't stand them.
And
can't stand each other.
What was hilarious too was seeing people like, Jimmy, please go away, like just getting so mad, like they were so ready to see him gone. And then the fact that he came, and then it compounded with the
well, he did that though, Johnny. He put out the press conference, I'm going to be taking my talents elsewhere.
Right.
Thank the 49er fan base and organization.
Kind of a weird situation there, don't you think?
Yeah, a little bit weird. Just don't ask Kyle about how it was a weird situation. I've never.
You think it's weird? I don't know. What's weird about it?
I mean, yeah, it's weird.
It's weird?
When you spend all this money on a quarterback and you can't stay healthy. That's really weird. It's really weird when you get a quarterback on an average play that everybody runs getting hurt too. That's really weird. I remember that. It's such a great.
All right, so we're gonna have part 3 of this, right?
Yeah,
we're gonna have part 3.
Yeah, we got to do part 3. This is fun.
Got to do part 3. This is a lot of fun, and I think for me it really helps me get perspective on everything with the 49ers. How they've done, because we either preach like crucify them now or patience when they come off the draft, and I think what we're seeing is. One, you see the evolution of how the 49ers have been drafting guys, how they develop guys, how they approach roster building and everything with it. It's really fascinating to watch, but I sure appreciate you guys coming on. Thank you guys so much for being here and talking. We are definitely going to do part 3. We need to do it next week.
Yes.
Not wait a couple weeks. That was on my end. I totally was like, it was like John and I were talking about before the show. I sit there and I'm like, I think about messaging people and I totally forget. And so I'm really bad about that, but I need to do it before next week. At the beginning of the week after that, so in like 9 days from now, I'm leaving the country for a little over a week.
Nice,
so,
well deserved.
So
it's
Friday
not much of a vacation.
At noon,
I'm
possibly
going on a work trip. Yeah, so maybe we'll shoot for next Friday. I'll message you guys and see if we can lock that up and get it going. This has been a lot of fun. It's so great to anytime I get to talk 49ers with you two fine gentlemen. It is a fantastic day. So I want to thank you. Any parting words there, John or Wayne?
Dude, this is fun, and we can argue over all this stuff, but you remember everybody talking about firing Shanahan? Oh, if this Trey Lance pick doesn't work, he's going to get fired. Yeah, whatever. Get that.
Time to hold him accountable.
Like, yeah, the accountability is you are favored in all 17 games of the 2024 schedule because of the roster you built, because of the way you coach. This is a great time to be a member of the faithful, and it's a great time just to be here with you guys. Wayne, Johnny, I'm huge fans, and just thank you for everybody for watching.
Yes, Johnny, thank you for hosting this. I truly appreciate the platform. Guys, on my channel today at 4 p.m., we're going to be talking about favor. All right. So make sure you guys check that out. 4 p.m. Eastern time. Yeah, because I don't even know what that means any other time. So Eastern.
Weird.
Yep.
East Coast.
I'm never gonna get it. I'm 43, still can't figure out the time zones. All right. But Johnny Dell, appreciate you, John. You know I love you, bro. Can't wait till we bring back the John and Wayne show for the faithful. We're gonna have some fun this season. I can't wait.
Man, it's awesome. Thank you guys so much. Yes, we can't wait for some more shows in the future. We're definitely gonna be doing part 3, and my son's saying bye to everybody too. So he's about ready time to go down for a nap. So he's gonna let us all know. But thank you guys, thank you faithful for tuning in. But until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and go Niners.